So let's take some questions. I like questions. What do you guys got?
Hey everybody, it's Dave. I'm back with episode number 13 of the Maker Zone. I am super honored today to be here together with Christina Kehl. She's founded Knip, which is a famous IntroTech startup, at least for me. And I want you to talk about that a little bit if we can today. And also very active in the Swiss startup scene, which is growing pretty rapidly, as I've talked about before. So you want to say a few words and introduce yourself?
Happy to be here today. Thank you for having me. My background, I'm a lawyer by trade and came to Switzerland 3.5 years ago. Before that, lived in Finland, lived in London, and dived into the startup scene there. And now, pretty much since the beginning, active in the fintech scene. Founded Knip, as you said, and for the past year, pretty much I was doing the fintech work more professionally at SFS, because the association we started pretty much at the same time, like when we started Knip. But over the time, the volume of work got so big that I at some point said, okay, done with Knip, and I want to focus on something new. And then, of course, the fintech work and the collaboration between banks and insurance carriers and startups got more and more important. And so happy to be able to do the job at the moment, doing the political work and trying to set up a professional work network.
It's unbelievable. I mean, if you guys want to have impact in your lives, look at what she's done. She came to Switzerland only 3 years ago, and she's had way more impact than I had in 18 years here. So it's incredible. And, you know, you use everything you got and you put your energy into it. And therefore, I know who you are, even though we haven't really met before today.
No, we haven't.
So it's awesome to finally meet you.
Thank you.
I wanted to go through a couple of things. Giorgio's collected some questions about startups, fintech. We want to talk a bit InsurTech since we haven't covered that yet. So Giorgio, what did you collect? Let's see
we got an interesting question from Gabriel Miller. He is asking what are the trending startups in fintech, and maybe if you can tell us what are your favorite now.
Well, I think there is so much going on in the startup space and in the fintech space that I don't have the time to monitor the landscape. But of course, when you're interested in insurance, Lemonade just launched, which is like huge in the US. Yeah, Lemonade is an IntroTech startup. Well, it's actually, they want to build a new kind of insurance, so which is really cool. And of course, this is for me because with my background with Knip, although I don't have an insurance background. This is so interesting when you look at Knip and you think,
Seriously?
they must be from the insurance world, but neither Dennis or we are from the insurance world, not at all. We looked at the problems we had at Knip from a customer perspective and tried to find a solution. And this is why Lemonade is interesting as well, because it takes insurance to a new level, and so of course that whole space is interesting for me. But then also we have very interesting startups here in Switzerland. If you look at Conto Vista, if you look at Run My Accounts, who have been going for 7-8 years, grow their employee base on a regular level. This is so impressive because I know myself how difficult it is to start a company, to have the funding, to keep going. And so I think it's really cool to have the young, exciting players, but also the ones who are a bit more mature and actually have like ongoing business, which is so cool. And so in terms of trending, of course, I think it's blockchain, it's cryptocurrencies in Switzerland, it's security, it's wealth management, and I think insurance. These are probably the areas which I think are most important for Switzerland. And probably I think the other hubs like Singapore, London, they jump on these niches now as well. So you don't really talk about fintech in like a common sense anymore. You talk about niches, and then you separate the startups into.
Is there a new term for it, do you think, over time, or does it just evolve into the sub-terms?
Probably, I think so.
People stop talking fintech after.
Well, it's like fintech, IntroTech. IntroTech sounds horrible, but that's what it is.
What's the better name for it?
I don't know. Well,
Lemonade.
It's Insurance Zero, or I think there are probably some unicorns popping up at some point, like Transferwise in the UK. So you need like a few faces and a few companies that you actually put then fintech or IntroTech or whatever label on, and then people know what you're talking about.
Do you think it brings up everybody in the tank over time? So is everyone going to follow Transferwise now, or what happens?
No, probably not. I think the interesting thing, especially in finance, is that you can look at it from like a B2C and a B2B perspective. And that's Transferwise is it's B2C. So this is what you see. But a lot of startups do a great job in the background when they work B2B, when they actually provide solutions to a UBS, to banks, to insurance carriers that you actually don't see. So for startups, of course, it's always a bit difficult to actually see like the core problems and to get the solutions to where they actually should be, because it's much easier just to focus, for example, on the middleman situation where you aggregate data, where you build a nice front end, but you don't actually touch the real systems. So I think Transferwise is extremely important because it shows that there's interest and that there's traction and that you have important investors like Richard Branson, and that helps the whole community.
You know what's fascinating to me with them is I talked with some inside people there, and their customer traction goes 2 to 3 new customers per customer. So it's all word of mouth. They don't spend money on marketing. Did you apply a similar technique with Knip, or how does it work with IntroTech right now? Does it get word of mouth, or how do you market?
Well, insurance in general is not really word of mouth because nobody wants to talk about insurance.
That's true.
That's probably different. And I think Transferwise, they're doing a good job in terms of branding and marketing. They have very nice Facebook campaigns and they try to generate just interest through cool activities in London. So I think one day they had like bathtubs on the pavement and they just made some commercials.
Yeah, I saw that one. That was hilarious.
So I think this is cool because that's new to the finance world. That you do something funny that is so not known, and this is why probably everyone is interested in that. In terms of insurance, it's difficult. So because, as I said, nobody really wants to talk about insurance. You're just happy if you don't have to pay too much and there's not an incident that you have to care about. So it's not what we learned. It's not low interest, but it's low engagement. So of course you have an interest to be safe and to be secure, but you don't want to engage with an insurance carrier. And this is, I think, a problem as well for insurance carriers in the future, because if they don't understand the digital customer, will they lose that connection point? And of course, that's a chance for the startups, because if you can make, I don't know, maybe an insurance impression more interesting or more interactive, which is difficult because how do you want to do that? Gamification or whatever. But
it's not very fun. The whole
it's
subject
not.
isn't fun.
So probably it's much better to attach like the insurance coverage. I wouldn't even call it a policy anymore, but just a coverage to, like, for example, an object that you buy, like a car or the traveling and so on, so that you are automatically insured, so that you don't have to care about that anymore. And I think that will be the future, because the less you have to engage with it, the better.
But didn't the other verticals try that before? Like the automotive industry, if you look at Ford Motor Company, right? Didn't they have an insurance branch that was huge for many years? And General Motors. And I don't know what happened to that over the years, but
they're probably. I think you're right. I think there were some insurance carriers that actually belonged to the mother company of BMW or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what happened to them, because they didn't come up in any of our research. So that's interesting. That might be an option in the future again.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting the development of insurances, if it's gonna develop in open marketplaces like Amazon, and then you can select the cheapest insurance for this kind of product, or going in the other direction, the insurance being embedded in the good or service you're gonna buy. Yeah. And I see both scenarios to happen, and then the insurances will disappear as a company. You will no longer deal with Allianz or Zurich. You will buy a car and have it insured. Or you will go on, on Amazon and buy the insurance
because it's just easier.
Because it's the cheapest
and
the highest rated.
That's actually one of the big fears, I think, because for a long time, actually insurance carrier were brands. So they invested a lot of money into marketing and branding, because in terms of products, well, they're all pretty much the same, right? And so they just had to put some little differentiators into their products, but in the end they're all the same. And the customer don't really care with who they are.
No, I don't think the new customer really cares at all. I mean, we have to do a lot of user experience and design work, actually. Yeah. And I don't know, what's your view on this? Does it happen that like customer experience becomes more important than the underlying touching of systems and architecture, or
I think it's,
or is that overrated?
The interesting thing is, as long as the back end is not ready, there's not really so much point for fancy front ends. So that's really the core problem at the moment, because as long as the fancy front ends can't really connect to the back end, what's the point?
Yeah.
And this is really the problem at the moment. So that even if the insurance carriers would want to be innovative, they can't, because they're sitting on huge legacy systems, just like the banks. So it's very difficult to really undergo innovation there, because innovation from the inside out, it's pretty much not possible, because their own systems can't even communicate with each other. So how should then some outside player connect to the inside there? It's totally not possible.
Putting the lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like you have a very old engine and you put some nice sparkles and some flowers around it, and you're please don't break down, please don't break down. This is how I think in the whole financial industry, this is how it looks at the moment.
I want to come back to that in a minute, but do you have another one?
I mean, there is one question: do fintech startups require mainframe at the back end? And that's
just kind of answered it.
Yeah.
About the mainframes at the back end.
Yeah.
Maybe it depends on the kind of startup, because if you do blockchain, you're replacing the back end and the mainframe.
Yeah.
But I get this really positive vibe off of you about Swiss fintech when you talked about cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Or Crypto Valley, as they call it here in Switzerland, and wealth management, and also what you're doing with IntroTech. Yeah. You make me feel good about being in Switzerland with fintech. It's a good place to be then.
It is a good place to be. I think in terms of how the situation has changed over the past 2 years, because I think SFS we started 2014, so 2.5 years now. Back then, it wasn't even a word, fintech, in Switzerland. No one knew it. As journalists here at NZZ, they didn't even know that there were startups here. So things have really changed. Now this year we had the Federal Council, what is it, Bundespräsident. We had him with us last week. Uli Mura, the Bundesrat, he actually backed fintech as a technology, as the future of the finance place of Zurich and of Switzerland. And that's amazing, because honestly, 2 years ago, nobody even talked to the startups. We weren't taken seriously. Yeah. And this has really changed. And back then we wanted to bring startups and fintech into the media, into the corporates, so that they start the dialogue of getting to understand, hey, yeah, they're young and wild, but maybe they're cool. And of course, maybe we speak different languages, but SFS tries to be kind of the connector in between somehow. And I think there is a lot of positive energy here. We have cool founders. We have people who really try something. You don't go to a UBS, but say, hey, we start our own fintech company, and who really want to change something. Then, of course, we do have some problems in terms of tax situation and so on. But in general, a lot has changed.
But advise me, because I am like a lot of innovation guys at a big bank.
Yeah.
Struggling with this. I mean, I fight every day with the team who's around me partially now to try to get things through. It's very difficult. Do you have advice for innovation people within the banking industry, how we can make it better or faster?
I think it's very difficult as long as you're like in these legacy systems, in these hierarchies. I think it has to do with education. So what I think is very helpful, if guys from big companies understand and get to meet people from startups. Because then they see, hey, this is a person too. This is a cool person to talk to. And I think when they come back from innovation visits, for example, or from fellowship programs where they go to the US, to the Silicon Valley, or into a startup for 2-3 months, they come back and they have the energy again, and they have the sparkles in their eyes, and they change stuff within their own company. So I think it's very difficult to have this innovative approach if you're always in a very sharp environment where everything is regulated. Yeah, if you're in a vacuum. And so go outside, meet these people, go to the events, and then I think then you get probably the energy. But this is what you're doing. So
yeah, we're trying. That's true. We're trying to. Do you have another one, or
maybe
is that pretty much the question?
There's the last one. How should governments build a fair model to support fintech and banks?
Yeah.
That's a question.
How should governments build the model to support fintechs and banks?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think there is, of course, that's probably one of the issues we had in Switzerland for a long time, was that there was only one banking license. So whenever you wanted to do something in the financial space, there was only one regulatory tool that you had, and you had to get the banking license. So you had to put down whatever, 25 million. So, okay, then this is just a killer for any startup. And this is changing already at the moment again. So they're talking about the sandbox, where without any regulatory issues, you can just start your business model. Then the question is whether this is on a business side actually valid, because if the sandbox is not big enough, then you can't build a scalable business case. So that's maybe one of the issues there. We have to see what they will announce in a few weeks. On the other hand, of course, it's not that startups want to be totally not regulated, because there are risks there, and this is what regulation is for. But on the other hand, you can't compare a startup to a UBS, for example, or to a Zurich Insurance or whatever. This is just not the same risk. So I think there have to be different tranches of regulation, and what probably would be even more helpful if you would have regulation down to specific business cases. But there, the regulator has to understand the business cases.
And they need to put people on to do that, and they have to have the skills to do it.
Exactly, and the understanding. And this is the technology is going so fast. So this is what we just discussed on Monday in our politics panel, was that actually the regulator, they should work together with the startups in terms of consulting, which would help that you don't have huge legal fees in the beginning, whether your business has to be regulated in what way. So actually the regulator could do that. Or on the other hand, they could be like a fellow for a startup, but because then they would learn how actually the development of the technology goes. Because how do you want to regulate something that you don't understand?
You can't do it.
You can't.
But you've been in London and other places that are very vibrant. I mean, the FCA headquarters sits across from Canary Wharf. So, like, have you seen any regulators interacting on a day-to-day basis with the startups yet? And how do you see that developing over time here?
In Switzerland, well, it's getting better. This is, I think, probably the most the most that I can say. So, for example, on Monday, a guy from FINMA was at our panel, which is great.
Oh, cool.
Because 2 years ago, when we asked FINMA, please come to our events, please get into the conversation, they said no.
They weren't ready yet.
They weren't there. And so I think they have now a website for fintech. They have a specific, probably very small team with an email address, which is fintech@finma or something like that. So it has changed in terms of they want to get into the process, because we put a lot of pressure on them and say, hey, the FCA, they're not just a controller, they are an enabler as well.
Very active, yeah.
And I think this is key, because if you want to enable, you have to understand, and then you can regulate. Otherwise, if you just regulate you can't regulate the future. It's like, it just doesn't make sense, and it has to be a startup process in terms of, well, we can adapt. It's not like we put down the regulation now and then we look at it in 3 years again. It has to be a process of maybe 3 months.
But can I ask you, how does it work now with the Kickstart Accelerator in Zurich? Because you talked about having to have 25 million seed capital to get the basic banking license, and there was only one. Now, how are these startups operating here in the fintech vertical in Switzerland? How are they able to work around this?
Well, there are models that don't need a banking license. For example, at Knip, it's an IntroTech startup, and we are regulated with FINMA as well, but it was a pretty simple broker license. So there are models where you don't need a license and you can just get started. But then, very much you are not in the core of the banking or the insurance world. So if you have, for example, a PFM like Contavista, they provide the interface and the data aggregation in the background, so they can just work with any bank that they want. But I think where the money is made and where actually the music's playing, there then you need more licensing and more regulation, and that's probably maybe not for your first startup.
I gotta tell you though, it's massively scary to me. I was out in Asia last year, and the volume, just the number of bodies working on things. If you go out to Bash, if you go out to Startup Bootcamp out there, you've got a team at this desk and this desk and this desk, and you look across the floor and there's like 1,000 people working on 1,000 ideas. And here, we've got a start.
I
but
know.
I feel like we should be doing a hell of a lot more.
Yes, this is what I so agree. When I think Bundespräsident Schneider-Ammann said it this year at the World Economic Forum, at his panel, he said that in China alone, every year 8 million people graduate from university. This is the amount of people that we have in Switzerland.
Yeah.
This is really scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, it's a huge chance for China. That's great. And we have to be very, very aware of that. And this is what I'm really trying to put into the heads here in Switzerland, because Switzerland sometimes feels like a haven to me. It's still like something very safe and very secure, but the world is changing. It's changing dramatically quickly. And the more time we lose now in terms of positioning Switzerland or fintech or a finance hub, because if you look at the rankings, we are not there. It's like Amsterdam, Tel Aviv, Berlin, London, and Zurich is just nowhere. And this is what we really try to change, because if we're not there, then the investors won't come, the startups won't come. That's why the Kickstart Accelerator is great, because it gets out into the world and says, hey, we do something in Zurich. But on the other hand, what does the Kickstart Accelerator do for the startups here? So does that actually change something for in the environment for?
I think it has.
For the startups.
Just what I'm seeing, and we go over there once a week at least. Drink a bad coffee. We need to upgrade the coffee machine. Basically, a Kickstart Accelerator. I'm working on it. I think I found it. What frustrates me, though, is that there's not enough long passes being thrown from Switzerland yet.
Yeah.
So we're doing a lot of retail things and a lot of user experience, but not really. And I've seen a lot of blockchain, which is actually back-end stuff. It's not front-end stuff for the consumer for at least another 5 years, I think. Yeah. But I'm not seeing enough platforms being built. I'm not seeing privacy services being launched. Really open finance, peer-to-peer hasn't really been done. Where do you see this all going? Do you see longer, more distant strategic stuff coming from here? Or?
No, probably not strategic. I think because there is, that's the funny thing, there is no fintech strategy. And I think this is something that we would have to set up for ourselves, really, because if we just follow any path, then we have a few startups here and there. And for example, Crypto Valley is a great example where actually it's aggregated, and that's a story. And the international media, CNN, Reuters, they actually jump on that because it's a cool story to be told, even if there were no bitcoins used at the Gemeinde. But in the end, who cares? It's a story that they actually accepted. So this is what I'm saying since probably 1 or 2 years, that we need a communication strategy as well. So we could, I think we're as I said before, we're historically known for wealth management, for insurance, for security, and for probably now digital currency. So these are the strengths, and we should communicate them to the world and say, hey, this is there's something going on there.
That's really cool.
Yeah. But who should do that work? Because we at SFS, we like 2-3 people working on that.
Only.
Yeah, like 4 events.
You think the big players should do more?
Yes.
Than we're doing? In
terms of what, like the money that is invested in terms of fintech, so meaning the future of the finance hub in Zurich and in Switzerland, is just this is ridiculous money. It really is ridiculous money, and I don't know, like in terms of what is the future worth? Because even if you can't work with startups right now, but 9 in 10 startups fail. But where do these guys end up? They end up at 6 at wherever. So they actually bring the innovation knowledge, what they learned in the process, into the corporates. So this is what I really don't understand, because if we don't get innovation here in Switzerland, it will be in London, in Singapore, wherever, and getting these people back to Switzerland will be highly expensive.
Afterwards, yeah. Wow, boom, what is the future worth? I mean, this is Christina Kehl. I'm again super honored to be with you today. Thank you for educating me and the team on this. For us, fintech has been a passion since 2012, but like you said, it wasn't even a term yet.
No.
And we're trying our damnedest to bring it. So
yes,
thank you for
same
bringing
here.
game to Switzerland. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions? Thanks, guys. See you again.
So let's take some questions. I like questions. What do you guys got?